Hi, I'm Jennifer Mulholland.
And I'm Jeff Shuck. We're the co-leaders of Plenty. Thanks for joining our podcast, Plenty for Everyone.
Each episode, we talk with conscious leaders like you to explore abundance in work and life, fulfillment in head and heart, and ways we can all work together to make this world a better place.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plenty for Everyone, the podcast for conscious leaders. We are excited to have you here today. I am Jeff Shuck, one of Plenty's co-leaders, and as always with me is Jennifer Mulholland.
Hi, everybody.
Plenty's other co-leader. Thank you, Jen. And we have a special guest today, our good friend, conscious leader, marketing extraordinaire, great guy, father, person we can't wait for you to meet, Andrew Mondzelewski. And I'm so excited I got the name right.
You got it. Not the easiest of names.
Welcome, Andrew. Andrew, to give people a little bit of background, is a marketing director at Beam Suntory. Beam Suntory is one of our favorite companies, a longtime client. And Andrew has done a number of different things there. Right now, he's managing the House of Suntory portfolio, and he'll talk about all of that. But he's a wonderful example of conscious leadership, and Beam Suntory is a wonderful example of a company that is, as they call, growing for good. So marrying growth and social purpose and doing it in a really elegant way. So welcome, Andrew.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Marketing extraordinaire. I don't know if I can fulfill that one. I'll try.
Of course you can. Well, we had such the pleasure of getting to know you through your leadership with the Maker's Mark brand, one of our beloved whiskey, bourbon deliciousness. And maybe we'll explore a little bit about what we did before. But I think, what we're really interested in is talking a bit about how business can do good in the world and what you're noticing as a leader of a for-profit, large company that has international roots, has local US roots, has oversight to hundreds of different brands, lots of moving parts, that has had an incredible focus around giving back to society and doing good with the collective efforts of multiple brands. So, we're living in such a weird time where a lot is changing, and maybe we could just start there and explore what you're seeing and what inspires you of being a part of a for-profit company that really cares about, giving back to the environment and doing good by its people.
Yeah, thanks so much. Having worked at Beam Suntory for about 4 years now, I'm really proud of the company that I work for and the brands that we have in our portfolio as well. And I've been lucky enough to work across some really special brands, such as Knob Creek, which is a super premium bourbon that hopefully a lot of the listeners know. Of course, Maker's Mark, the work that I did with you all, and we can dig into that project and that brand a little bit, since you know it dearly. And then now my current role on House of Suntory brands from Japan. Our parent company is actually a Japanese-owned company called Suntory Holdings. And so right now I represent our Japan brands. Everybody's into the Japanese whiskey. We also have a Japanese vodka and a Japanese gin that I represent. But I guess back to your question around, Beam Suntory is great because we've got great corporate support around supporting initiatives, trying to better the world, trying to better our employees, trying to better our customers and our distributors. And we can do that as a company, but we can also do it as on an individual brand level. And I think there's examples throughout our organization where we've done that. And I imagine that there's others who work for a company, but they also have different divisions or different brands. And so it's really interesting how we've used the company platform, in certain areas, and then of course the brands that people love for other areas.
I'd love to maybe just to go a little bit further there. It is mid-August right now when we're recording this. And I was reminded this morning, there was a quick news blurb that about a year ago, it's about the 1 year anniversary of 150 or so CEOs of the Business Roundtable getting together and issuing this big statement that business should be about more than maximizing profit for shareholders. And at the time, Plenty's reaction, I have to say, we kind of rolled our eyes and I said, like, where have these people been? Because, the tradition of at least certain businesses doing more than just trying to make a buck is really longstanding. And one of the reasons we love Suntory is they're perhaps the best example of this. So if people don't know that name, it's a company that was founded, I think, 1899. It's well over 100 years old. And at their founding, dedicated themselves to creating social good as they grew. So it's really in the fabric of the organization. And one of the things, maybe to just expand on what you said, do you notice that? Like, do you notice that culture, Andrew, when you're working there as contrasted with other places you've been? Is it something that feels explicit, or do you kind of have to dig to bring that out?
Oh, it's by far, this company is the most clear in the prioritization of that. Um, I've only been in the company for 4 years, and Suntory bought Jim Beam brands, I think, over 5 years now, and the ownership, it toggled between different owners over a period of 30 to 40 years. But I think with Suntory, it's truly found a home. The Suntory philosophy is living in harmony with people and nature. And we hear that phrase almost every day and through everything that we've done. And as you know, with Maker's Mark, we've even kind of borrowed that phrase a little bit in some of the work that we did there. But really, it's about living within your communities, inspiring, taking care of nature, the resources that we've been given on this earth. Um, and so giving back in both those areas really is something that is just crystal clear, from an organizational perspective. And we are encouraged as brand owners as well to utilize that philosophy and bring that to life in a brand relevant way. So I can give a few examples. From a corporate perspective, as you can imagine, being in the beverage alcohol space, a lot of our efforts in the past have been around responsible consumption, not drinking and driving, marketing and advertising, making sure that we hit, we're only advertising to people of age. And when we do advertise, it's in a responsible way. But I think since Suntory took ownership, that's expanded in so many ways. And we've seen that even this year, where at a Beam Suntory level, we're contributing to things such as bartender relief, restaurant relief programs here in the midst of COVID, social justice organizations, given all the unrest that we've had and the reforms and all the protesting and obviously Black Lives Matter, et cetera, to environmental initiatives where we have really strict and visible targets of what we're trying to accomplish as a company. And I know this is not uncommon, that this last piece for a lot of organizations, but it really is something, the forefront of almost all of the leadership presentations. And, how are we tracking? What are our brands doing? And which brands are going to be able to contribute the most in this space? And so from a corporate level, we've just seen kind of the typical bev alcohol space initiatives really expand beyond that to more important kind of societal places.
One of the things along that thread, I mean, we've seen that working with you and other brands at Beam Suntory, of the environmental focus, being in harmony with nature, and witnessed the emphasis on being in harmony with people. And so you're a dad, you're juggling a lot, and COVID hits and working from home a lot, and how you're finding being in harmony with yourself. I think would love to hear, how are you juggling being in harmony with yourself? And do you see the expression in the culture at Beam Suntory supporting the people to be in harmony with themselves? Like, maybe talk a little bit about the people side of that social good.
Yeah, that's a great question and point to make. It's been hard. Like anybody listening, this has been a hard year, but there has been some fruits, from it, some silver linings, some special opportunities. I think I can't be more thankful of my organization for what they provided. As soon as this whole situation hit, they assured us that our jobs would be safe no matter what. We knew that our business would be impacted. They had the right tools and technology put in place to do video conference and to support, whatever technical needs we needed to be able to work effectively at home. They gave us extra vacation days, if you will, some kind of work-free days on a few Fridays throughout the summer, and they plan to continue that as well. And really, like a lot of organizations, it's Beam Suntory has largely been a face-to-face culture where we thrive on human interactions. We thrive on what we call Gemba, visiting bars, talking with consumers, being out with the people who we're trying to engage with our brands. And so it's been a big shift working from home. I think for sure others have that as well, but Beam Suntory has been truly supportive. On a personal level, yeah, I've got two sons, 6 and 8. I've got my wife, she's working full time, so we're juggling kind of who's managing the kids, who's in which office at what time. I'm in my bedroom right now, which I could never imagine working in my bedroom day to day potentially. And so I think it's really taught me that, personal and professional life, is one. And really that probably always should have been the case, but I think it's really emphasized it now. This is something that you guys instilled through me when we started working together on the Maker's Mark project. You challenged us not to just think about, with our corporate or brand hat on of Maker's Mark during their project, but what do you believe and what do you want? How do you want the world to be? How do you want this brand to be perceived as a person, and as a leader working on the brand? And I think this COVID situation has really just accelerated that in my mind, because I was more of a person where, when I first started my first job, it was one of those situations where, my job wasn't as engaging, but it was the right career. It was a good job. It, represented what I was good at, but it didn't really inspire me that much. So I in my mind, I worked it out as, I'm just going to go put my head down, do my work. And then when I go home, I'll volunteer in the church. I'll make sure I'm with friends and doing things that inspire me, hobbies and interests, and that's going to be my outlet. It's amazing how my philosophy has changed now of, no, everything you should do, you should give your full self. You shouldn't have to compromise, your values or what you're interested in doing, just for your job. And so again, Beam Suntory has allowed me to do that very well.
I love that you just took us there. And that's such first of all, I have a huge smile on my face to hear you say that. And it's such a key part of what we do and what we say. And I do wonder, I don't know that any of us get it until we have an experience that we're in a place that, I think we have to go through being in a job that's not gratifying and trying to do that mental trade, and then getting to the end and realizing the trade isn't worth it. I think without sounding like an old man, the older you get, the more precious your time is, and the more you see, that's the real gift that we give each other, and the work that we do is devoting our time to it. So the idea that we only get rewarded through money feels like such a limited old idea, and that we should give a shit about our work. And that's honestly one of the keys to great social impact, is that people actually care. One of the incredible things about Suntory is social good is internally who they are. And if we have our coaching, usually for Suntory brands, is it's within you. You need to bring it further out, let people see how you really are. And it's such in contrast to a lot of big companies now who are kind of coming late to social impact, and they're trying to plaster it over the top, but they don't have the internal character that supports it. So anyway, I love this point, and I'm going to actually kick it to Jen, because I'd love for you to talk a little bit about something that all of our clients have heard you say, which is we live one life. It's this idea that Andrew's teed up. And what does that feel like? Can you just expand on that concept before we go further?
I mean, I think what you're pointing to is what we've lived, and what we try and really re-inspire people to feel safe enough to, break down their own glass ceilings and their own self-inflicted boxes around, I live a personal life and a professional life. It's bullshit. It's just not true. We live one life, and we can bring our whole selves to whatever we're, is on our plates, or whatever we're putting effort into, or wherever we show up. When, that's the common denominator for all of us, is bringing our humanity, bringing our skills, bringing our voice to wherever we bring our presence. And that's the gift, literally bringing our presence to our whole self. Whether we're scared shitless to do so or not is another story, right? Whether we're secure in our own foundation of who we are, to say, this is who I am. But what's happened is we dress a certain way. We put a certain costume on, we put a certain face on, and then we take that mask off when we go home, or vice versa, right? And that's exhausting, and it's draining, and it has a price in our well-being and on our ability to thrive. And so I think what we've lived, and sometimes we're literally saying, like, coming out of the closet of our spiritual beliefs, or coming out of the closet with causes we really care about, like bringing that passion forward, is so important, because it's why we're here. Like, we are literally architected with certain skills and certain cares to apply to create good in the world. And if we hold ourselves back, typically through self-limiting beliefs and thinking, then we're doing a disservice to what we want to contribute to. And the world needs us more than ever to bring that full heart, full mind, full presence to whatever that work is, And I think one thing that you lived through, Andrew, with coming to our retreat center, Heart Space in Park City, and going through our Meridian process, which is a strategic planning process, you saw and lived why we put passion at the center, right? Like, we sometimes, I think that passion, is a nice to have, or you can feel passion in people's voices about something to care about. But really architecting and extracting, what is the brand? What is the company? What do the people care about? And that's the fuel that creates change. And that's needed now more than ever. And so, I don't know, I think maybe that's kind of a little bit more narrative about why and what we share, and why it's so important now more than ever. So maybe react to that and share a little bit about living through that experience of passion and why it matters.
By the way, if you can send some photos of a beautiful Heart Space in Utah, I miss it very much. So it was such a beautiful place to have a retreat. And I know right now not everybody can get there given the times we live in, but man, that was such a special place to do a brand planning strategy session, getting our team all out there together, with you all leading us and inspiring us the full way. But yeah, no, I mean, it's the process we went with you guys on Maker's Mark. I think it really opened all of our eyes on the team. So often as brand owners or business owners, you might do a planning session and strategy session, and you're building PowerPoints and you're writing on whiteboards, and you're in a stark white conference room. Everybody can probably picture that one time or another in their life. But just to be out in a beautiful space, getting out with nature, getting away from your computer, away from your phones, and spending 3 or 4 days just to really dig in and talk about kind of our personal lives, our professional lives, the brand that we want to represent, and what we want our brand to be, as you said, with passion at its center, was really an inspiring process for us and for our whole team. And I've told you guys before, it was somewhat uncomfortable, I think, for us, because we're so used to this typical process of, we're going to do a half-day session in the conference room and put your laptops down, but nobody really does, right? And you don't really open up and get away from it all. And so again, to spend 3 or 4 days and to really, start from the beginning of what this brand is all about. I think people respond best to businesses and brands where they can see the people and either physically see the people or know about the people, or just feel the passion of those people and what they care about, what they stand for. And I think that passion shines through then, and it comes through as authentic. Your point about a lot of brands trying to bolt on a social purpose strategy. I think what was great about what we did with Maker's Mark was it was right in front of us. It was things that the brand had always represented down in Little Loretto, Kentucky. But nobody in the world really knew these stories and knew what it was all about. It's like, how do we bring that out to the world, and how do we start to inspire the world to be as a brand that people generally know. I mean, most people know Maker's Mark, but really inspiring us to be the word beacon. I remember when we were at our session, we're like, how can we were climbing up the mountain, and as I was looking down on the beautiful ski resort below, I was thinking, man, we can inspire everybody below as a brand, if we take the right actions and we show up in the right ways. And so again, it was an incredibly fruitful process for our brand, and it's still. I don't work on Maker's Mark currently, but it's still inspiring that brand team today, and all the decision making that they're undergoing.
Well, I think it was, honestly, it was really inspiring for us too. And it's a reason we've worked with Suntory on a number of occasions now. And I think I never really spent any time thinking about the craft behind the liquid. And so as part of this engagement, we had a chance to go down to the distillery in Loretto, Kentucky, which is an incredibly beautiful, talk about harmony with nature. An incredibly beautiful place that's worth the trip. And, one of the things that we learned, and I distinctly remember us going through that tour with you, is the craft of making the liquid is distilling it to its essence. Literally, you take all this stuff, and the raw material is really great quality stuff, but then you boil it and you heat it and you cool it and you stir it and you be really, really patient, and something emerges that's much more concentrated and much more pure. And Jen, I feel like we've used that analogy 10,000 times since then about, getting to the heart of either your personal values as a leader or your values as a company. And I think, again, to go back to what we often see doesn't work in social purpose is kind of adding all this crap onto other stuff you're already doing and thinking like more is better. And usually more is just more. It's just louder and noisier and more confusing. And often we've used that analogy of, getting a distillation, getting to the essence. And I even remember in that engagement, Andrew, you were great at saying, sometimes we'd suggest language, or we would say, this is what we hear you all saying. And you were great about letting it sit, mulling with it. Andrew would always say, can you send me the PowerPoint? Because I want to mess with it. And you'd come back with something that was more you, right? That was more, no, I think this is how we'd say it. And that, just the power of patience, Jen, this has come up on kind of every podcast we've done, but you really see it in, you can't make whiskey without wanting to be really patient. There's something, I think, so poignant there at a time when everyone's still trying to run at the same pace that they used to. So I'll just stop
and
there.
doing that I think the dance between the personal and the professional, the organizational and the individual, like this is the theme, right, of the soup of, organizations are made up of people. And so how do we really see, support, and hear what we in ourselves need at the core essence, like distilling what we care about, distilling what we're good at, distilling our purpose. Why are we here right now in a very complex, confusing, uncertain time? And it does feel like, this forced pause in some cases has helped us reduce the distractions, because we were running really fast in a complex environment. And the joke at Beam Suntory, Andrew, that you've lived and breathed is the conference room shuttle and shuffle, right? Of just how many people are in and out. And the joke is everybody's getting kicked out of the conference room because it is just chaos in the office, right? Every time it was just the giant joke. And it's really hard to even describe it, but every Zoom call, somebody's coming in or conference room's getting confiscated. And I think, just living in these times of slower distillation, of really getting to the heart of what we as individuals are here to do, where we're here to serve, how we can contribute that's authentic to each one of our stories and each one of our paths. And as a business, how do we get to the heart of the strategy? Like that's really was the tagline about Meridian, and the process you went to is we want to help get to the heart of what you're here to do. And often that's not putting more PowerPoint pages to the deck. And often that's not more sentences added to, the messaging and communications. So, how are you, I think, making sense, or how are you distilling, like what is really important to you now as you have moved up the chain in leadership, as you have a broader, view and influence of brands, and as you're engaging, the Japan kind of ethos and heritage and liquid, if you will. How are you making sense or distilling what matters most in these times?
Yeah, I love that analogy that you were getting at there, slowing down to move fast. Like I think that's at Beam Suntory, like other organizations, we tend to just move so fast all the time, and it really is important sometimes to slow down so that you can move fast, and you can move fast, with more clarity. So I think that was another learning and benefit of our work we did with you at the Meridian, through the Meridian process. For me in my current role, it's been really interesting because I worked on House of Suntory. I was on Maker's Mark for 2 years. I'm on House of Suntory now for 7 months. In my profession, in my company, in my type of role, it's not uncommon for us to move around brand teams, every 2 years, 2.5 years. And one thing that I'm very mindful because we do that is that we were, and this is our president of brands, Jessica has said this before. We are only a few minutes in the life of these brands with our work on them, and so how can we leave them in a better place, or how can we guide them to a better place? We can't usually reinvent them or make such drastic changes to kind of completely reinvent a brand. Um, so I've taken that approach. With Maker's Mark, that brand's been around forever, right? It's been around for I think over 60 years now, and I knew that my time maybe finite and maybe only a few years, and it was. And so I really leaned into being inspired when I went to Loretto, Kentucky, getting down there as much as possible, talking to the family, the Samuels family, and Rob, who leads the ship now, to inspire, to understand, the history and what makes that brand tick, and to help make sure that I could make a difference and I could bring that story, to the forefront with consumers, with bartenders, with our distributors and our sales teams. Um, and so on House of Suntory now, I'm taking a similar approach. Again, as you said at the beginning of the call, Suntory was founded in the 1800s, and a lot of our whiskey brands have been around for a very long time, almost 100 years now. I think we've been producing whiskey. And so, I'll give a quick example, and I'll be honest, I didn't have all the right answers here, but when the George Floyd protests were happening and all brands were making decisions, we quickly gathered as a team on House of Suntory, Suntory whiskey, especially. What are we going to do? What should we say? What are we going to do? Every brand team was having this discussion. And of course, at a Beam Suntory level, we were also engaging with our leadership of, how are brands to engage, how's Beam Suntory to engage. It ties back to the example I gave back at the beginning of the call. As an organization, we decided, we're going to make a commitment to support organizations that promote racial reform and racial social justice. But at a brand level, if you can do it in a brand authentic way, and you can put actions behind your words, and it's kind of your part of your ethos already, you should feel free and open to do that. And so for Maker's Mark, for example, I believe they posted and they've donated and they've worked with they've already been working with African American organizations. They won a Best Bourbon Award with the Black Bourbon Association, I think, last year. And so it was very authentic to that brand to be a part of that conversation. For us on House of Suntory, it was a difficult decision. We didn't end up posting anything externally facing. And there was a few reasons for that. The Japanese are typically a humble people. They're not outspoken. They don't necessarily get involved in discussions that have more quote controversy to them. And so, working with the Japan team, we just try to put everything on the table of why we shouldn't do it. And we didn't want to just do it to post a social message. We wanted to make sure we were doing something if we did it. So ultimately, we didn't do it because it wasn't necessarily part of our brand ethos. But what I can tell you we did do is, as an internal team, we looked at our team here in North America, my team, and we saw not a lot of diversity on our team. I mean, we've got the Japanese part of our team in Japan, but we've got a lot of Caucasian white people like myself on the team. And we said, how do we promote more diversity and inclusion within our team and within our network? For example, our 3 ambassadors that call on bartenders and try to inspire them with our brands. Not a lot of diversity. And so one of the things we're exploring right now is hiring a new ambassador resource that not only would be more diverse and bring diversity to our team, but would have a focus as part of their job title of bringing more inclusion and having those conversations and figuring out how can our brands help in an authentic way that makes sense for House of Suntory and Suntory whiskey.
Love that example. And I feel like this has been another undercurrent of our podcast the last few months. And you just gave an example of something I think we've said almost every episode, which is, if this anti-racism is an issue that involves everyone because everyone has a role to play in it. And I love the authenticity of saying, where do we have a voice here? And if sometimes we have to start at square one, and we all have to start with ourselves. So that feels so much more authentic and much more likely to have long-term positive impact than writing 4 social posts or, taking out a big ad in the Tribune. So I like that analogy, Andrew, because it's, like cleaning up all messes, you have to get messy. You have to get messy to clean up the mess. There's just no other way to do it. And sometimes that starts with saying, wow, we can just do better ourselves right here where we are. I think we're coming into another 12 months where we're all going to have those choices to make all the time. And I like that example of starting somewhere and moving past, platitudes, because platitudes aren't getting it done, frankly.
Yeah, and I love the what you also are speaking to, Andrew, that we're trying to encourage more brands and companies and people to follow, is that idea of looking at the situation, whatever that is, from multiple different views. Because when you were talking about like how do you respond in an authentic way, like there were a lot of different issue areas, cultural leadership that you had to take into account, and it's almost like you have to put it all on the canvas, right? And sometimes it's like taking off, the air. We have to see it all first, if you will, before we can distill what we're to do and what we care about and what is the most important area to focus on. And when we're running so fast, or there's all these pressures, or news channels are coming with different information that's conflicting, and it becomes really confusing to sort out. I think many of us are there. Like, what do you pay attention to? What is true around COVID, for example? It just honestly depends upon what channel you're tuning into and whether that resides and resonates with your belief system, whether it's true for you. But it feels like we've got multiple messages going on right now, and potentially a path is to see, we call it see what is. So with detachment, with an observation eye, with the observer mind, to say, I'm not going to plug into any one of these approaches or ideas or situations with judgment, but I'm going to see it all. And then you put it into the soup to say, what stands out? Where are the synergies and overlaps? Where are the interconnections? Is there a theme here? And then how is that resonating with my own truth, our leadership team's truth, the brand's truth of what we care about? And that, I think, is helping to distill what and how we act, rather than scatter plotting kind of like a reactive story or message or response that it often comes down to us whether we've created the space to actually be more intentional with what's aligning to do something rather than reacting because we can.
Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, again, slow down to speed up. I mean, there is a lot of pressure in those situations to act quickly and make a decision quickly. And I think, you know, consumers expect the bigger brands to say something and probably more quickly. So take Jim Beam or Maker's Mark, for example, within our own portfolio. Like I think there's a certain expectation. It's like, okay, Jim Beam, are you with us or are you not? You know, and there's millions and millions of consumers waiting for that. Um, with my brands currently, they're more what we call seed brands here in the U.S. And there's not a huge awareness level between brands like Haku and Roku and Toki. That doesn't mean we shouldn't care about it or we shouldn't say something. But I think it is an interesting point that whether you're Starbucks or you're Coca-Cola, like you are that beacon that we talked about earlier, and consumers are looking to brands to understand where they stand. How can they make a difference, and do they align with their values?
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to go back to the analogy of distilling great whiskey and say that patience isn't the same as doing nothing, right? So we talked about the distillation process a few minutes ago, and it's slow and requires patience, but it's a very active process. There's steps along the way that have to be taken. The temperature has to be at the right place, the right yeast gets added, things get stirred at the right time. And I think sometimes we see leaders equate patience with doing nothing. And sometimes patience does mean pausing, but often patience in leadership is a really active process, allowing yourself rest so you can get better ideas, taking time to solicit the input of customers and stakeholders requires patience, but it's an active patience. So I think there's something interesting there that you're bringing up, Andrew, about time to action. Slower time to action doesn't mean necessarily weaker result, right? It just means being methodical and thinking through what you want to do in a way that's authentic to you. And I think we go back to our work together on Makers. That's another thing that really comes out of that brand is slow, steady progress, deliberate decisions. You get really big and successful that way.
Yeah, Maker's Mark has been super consistent over time because of that. You can't necessarily say that for all the brands in our portfolio. So a lot of respect again for the family ownership there and the influence of the folks who work down in Loretto, Kentucky. And by the way, a lot of folks have tried to speed up the whiskey making process. There's all kind of companies working on how can you make whiskey faster and still have it taste the same, but nobody's been able to crack that code. It really does take that, as you said, active patience over time to create a really, really, really tasteful whiskey.
Yeah, the flavor changes, right? I mean, it does. It just, you can't sacrifice sometimes, the timeline and the process. And in hindsight, we often talk about at Lantern, our leadership retreat, like when we look back, you can see the yellow brick road perfectly laid to get you to where you are today. And your path makes sense. You can see the struggles and the losses and the opportunities and the challenges and the career steps that have gotten you prepared for this moment. And we would say we're all prepared for this moment. It may not make sense to us. Like the process of patience, the process of distilling oftentimes doesn't make sense until you know it works, until you trust that actually the same amount of yeast is needed every time, or the same amount of curation to get to the blend of flavors and the ingredients is not something you want to skip and rush, right? Or shortcut. And I love that analogy because we can apply that to ourselves personally, right? Of having a little bit more patient with ourselves right now as we try and architect a new future. What does our world want to look like? What is our society? What's on offer? What can become of our awakening of what's not right to create what is right, to create good in our business, whether you're in the social sector or not, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit. It really doesn't matter. We're all capable of co-creating a new future. And I think in this pause would love to hear, Andrew and Jeff, like what are you most hopeful about as we come out of, or as we architect and literally curate a new future for ourselves and for businesses? Do you have high hopes? What does that future look like if you could create that canvas of change? Andrew, do you want to take a stab at, like, what are you hopeful for, in your role as a leader, as a dad for your children and your family? Like, what do you want to see change?
Yeah, I think in the climate that we're in, it's hard to be hopeful sometimes, but I do remain optimistic and hopeful amidst the difficult year, that we're going to emerge in a better place. And two quick examples. I said I wouldn't do this, one professional, one personal. So actually, they're both. Um, but I think people traditionally have looked to nonprofits and even the government at one time for guidance and leadership, in ways of supporting communities. But what I'm excited about is that for-profit businesses now more than ever can play a really huge role, and we shouldn't shy away from that, because consumers care. Consumers demand it. All the research we've done is that they want to hear from brands, they want to hear brand opinions, they want to hear brand support. And so I think that's really exciting. Working on brands is that we can really lean into our passions, and know that our consumers want us to do that as well. On a personal level, we've learned that we can work remotely. And again, I can't imagine that I haven't been in the city of Chicago since March, in my office, and yet we're getting a shit ton of work done. I mean, we're getting almost everything done that we could have. Now, with that said, I very much miss meeting with people, seeing people's faces in person. I still don't think you can 100% replace that for every situation. But I do think it will be a fundamental shift in how we work, in the business world, and any kind of job that you have potentially, of having more flexibility, being able to work in different locations, not having to worry about where the corporate headquarters are. On a personal level, I was able to coach my son's baseball season once it was finally allowed to play in July as a head coach, and there's no way I could have committed to that. If I had to be downtown every day, I wouldn't have been home in time for evening practices and night practices, things like that. So that was a huge benefit of this all, and maybe that'll be possible next year with COVID taken care of, and maybe that's still a possibility, and that's one of the silver linings of all this as well.
I love that. I have so many of the same hopes, and so many of them, I think, just in general, we shared in our very first episode about what it means to have an orientation towards plenty, the idea that there is enough, that we are enough, that we all have enough. And I think, Andrew, we've probably said this on every episode, I think the country, the world has paid a big cost for this lesson, which needs a reckoning. That being said, there is a real lesson here about where real community comes from. And I'm very hopeful about the emergence of authentic community replacing kind of the virtual communities that we've all had to be satisfied with. I know my neighbors more than ever. I've spent more time in my garden than ever. I'm spending more time slowing down and talking to people and talking to my own kids. I'm not outsourcing their education to someone else, like quite literally this year, since they're taking school at home. And all those things feel like real signs of hope that the next wave is a way, the emergence of community. Instead of looking to leaders to save us, we can all be the leaders for each other. That said, I look forward to the time that I can get on a plane and go back to Heartspace, because I do miss that part of the work dearly and miss the chance to have these conversations together in person. But I don't know that I appreciated it as much 6 months ago. And so I'm hopeful for just a reorientation towards community. And I think the divisiveness, I hope, that we see all around us is being exposed. That it's not a useful tool except for people who want to keep us in a place of fear. And I think there's more people who want to be in a place of love and abundance. And that's a nice way to kick it to you, Jen. You got to answer last. What are you hopeful for?
Yeah, I mean, share the vision of plenty in a world that we can all see that we're capable of creating an abundant life for ourselves and each other and making this world a better place. I'm really hopeful that there is an awakening of consciousness happening. And I hope that we are part of that influence and movement so that we wake up to our inner connection, our connectivity, that we are not alone. We're really not different. We are the same human being underneath our skin color and our size and our shape and our ethnicity and our culture. And my hope is that as a result of really seeing each other more the same, that we're able to listen, we're able to help, we're able to work together in a much more harmonious, co-creative way. I'm hopeful that the fighting stops, because I really believe that what we focus on forms. And as we're fighting against something, we're giving it power to grow. And so as issues of disparity and injustice rise, I think we have an incredible opportunity to see how we meet these issues from a place of love and acceptance and shared connection, rather than pushing against something that seems so different than what we are inside. So there's a lot I'm hopeful for, but I feel like we're on the cusp of a major paradigm shift. We've talked for years, and there's a convergence of pressure, of change, that hopefully will help us as business leaders and owners and mothers and fathers and leaders to say, what is this better world we want to create? And believing that we are capable and worth it and powerful enough to create that future we see. So more to share, and thank you for throwing it back. But we're so thrilled, Andrew, to continue our friendship with you and really see the incredible work that Beam Suntory and you're doing internally and externally, and really appreciate you sharing your time with us.
Great. Thanks so much, Jen. Yeah, you guys are absolutely lifetime connections for me. Because again, to wrap the theme of this for me at least, you both delivered on a professional project for Maker's Market we have, but you've also inspired me in a way that's enriching to my personal life, in the way that I think about the world, my profession, my family life, and how do I tie all that together. So thank you all for that.
Nice thing to say. Thank you, Andrew Mondzelewski. Yes, say it 3 times fast. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard or are leaving feeling more hopeful and more stimulated, we hope that you'll hit subscribe and give us a rating. We do read all the comments that we get, and we really appreciate being here. Hope you'll join us next week for another incredible conversation.
Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. Join the conversation and learn more at plentyconsulting.com.